From Brazil to Iran, thousands have gathered to show solidarity with U.S. protests over the killing of George Floyd. He died after a Minneapolis cop kneeled on his neck for nearly 9 minutes. The worldwide events echoed peaceful messages in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. In South America, hundreds of protesters came together outside Rio de Janeiro's state government building on May 31st. They demanded an end to police brutality against Black people within Rio's working-class neighborhoods, known as favelas. Iranians held a small demonstration outside the Swiss embassy. 2 Syrian artists painted a mural in memory of Floyd in war-torn Idlib. And in Israel, a group gathered to protest the killing of Iyad al-Halak, an autistic Palestinian man, as well as Floyd. In London, demonstrators marched through the city and around the U.S. Embassy, defying the UK's coronavirus restrictions that prohibit mass gatherings. Protesters kneeled in unison, chanting, "No justice, no peace," in Trafalgar Square.
George Floyd! Hi, my name is Karina Pierre, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the harms of the world at the hands of law enforcement and police brutality. Today's purpose is to educate you, the audience, about how police brutality is severely affecting specifically the lives of African Americans throughout the United States, as well as the impact and how we could better resolve this inner conflict within our communities. More than 1,000 unarmed people died as a result of police harm between 2013 and 2019, and about a third of them were Black. In this presentation, I will try to persuade you on why police brutality needs to get under control and the things that need to happen to save lives and not harm them any further. Fact: about 17% of the Black people who died as a result of police harm were unarmed, a larger share than any other racial group, and about 1.3 times more than the average of 13%. You may be asking, what is police brutality? Police brutality is referred to as human rights violations by police that may include beatings, racial abuse, unlawful killings, torture, or indiscriminate use of riot control agents at protest. Moving on to victims, unfortunately, all of these victims have died at the hands of law enforcement for unlawful use of force, and they all resulted in the unfortunate sadness of death. Breonna Taylor, 28 years old, someone's angel. She was an EMT and only wanted to help save lives in this world. What happened? This happened in 2020. She was asleep in her home with her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, in Kentucky, when 3 officers arrived at their home to execute a search warrant in a case that they were prosecuting. Her boyfriend, Kenneth, was thinking that someone was trying to break into their home and fired his licensed weapon at law enforcement. And he proceeded to call 911. Breonna Taylor was unarmed and asleep, and in the crossfire, mostly being from law enforcement's guns, ended up being shot 8 times, all from their weapons. The action taken? The officers were reassigned based on investigation, and there has not been any further prosecution towards them. This is sad. This is unfortunate, because now someone has to go without their girlfriend, someone has to go without their daughter or their friend. Next victim. Tatiana Jefferson, 28 years old, someone's daughter, someone's aunt. This occurred in 2019 in Miami, Florida. She was at home when an officer, Aaron Dean, shot and killed her through the window of her home in the presence of her young nephew. The police were said to have been there responding to a call from a neighbor who reported that Jefferson's door was open. Thinking that she was the intruder into the home, they shot her on her couch. The action taken? The officer resigned, Officer Dean, and she was indicted on the charge of murder. But it still doesn't excuse the fact that this could have been prevented. So many lives have changed because of one action. My last example here today, George Floyd, 46 years old, someone's father. This occurred in 2020 and rapidly took the face of the earth. Floyd was accused of reportedly trying to use counterfeit money. He was handcuffed and put on the ground as Officer Derek Chauvin, who was on the scene, placed his knee aggressively on George Floyd's neck for exactly 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I'm going to let that sit with you. 8 minutes and 46 seconds that George Floyd's neck was being placed on with pressure from someone's knee, a law enforcement official. George Floyd, unarmed. George Floyd didn't attack. He followed orders, but he still died. For 8 minutes and 46 seconds, bystanders watched and pleaded with law enforcement to please let him go. They refused. Ultimately, George Floyd was found unresponsive, still with the officer's knee on his neck, and was later pronounced dead at the scene. This took the world by a storm. People just couldn't accept the fact that a law enforcement official who's supposed to help people would do such a wrongful thing. Derek Chauvin was the one officer that was charged with a harder punishment of second-degree murder, and the other 3 officers involved were charged with aiding and abetting second-degree murder and manslaughter. This case is still ongoing, and we only can hope that George Floyd gets justice. It has also been said that George Floyd's death was ruled a homicide in 2 different autopsies, so there was no accident. The support that this has received is from the movement Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is a movement started after the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's killer, George Zimmerman. Trayvon Martin was a teen who came from a convenience store going to his father's townhome when neighborhood watch officer George Zimmerman had shot him and killed him instantly. The movement started as a hashtag, and now it has become a decentralized political and social movement advocating for non-violent civil disobedience in protest against incidents of police brutality and all racially motivated violence against African Americans. The deaths of these innocent African American people have shook the lives of the world, and celebrities, as well as the Black Lives Matter movement and other companies, have shown their support. Celebrities like Beyonce, Ariana Grande, Billie Eilish, Cole Sprouse, Gigi Hadid, Harry Styles, and Keke Palmer, and many more have supported the movement and the victims of police brutality. It should also be known that there have been protests, countless protests, against the police to get justice for those who cannot get justice for themselves anymore. Those who can't fight in court, those who cannot get lawyers. This is an ongoing issue and it needs to get resolved yesterday. It needed to get resolved before George Floyd, Tatiana Jefferson, and Breonna Taylor ever went 6 feet underground. The solution, you may ask? We need to start prosecuting instead of just giving law enforcement a pass. We need to start holding them accountable for their actions. Free speech should not be a moment for police to attack. There should be precautionary rules in place so that those who can protest freely without having the fears of getting law enforcement involved and ultimately having them get arrested or worse. There should be more supervised sensitivity training, and it should be reinstated. into our police departments, where we can have screening evaluations with licensed medical professionals to deem these officers that they are, in fact, an officer that will uphold the law. We cannot all pay attention to every little thing that these officers do, but we can start by trying to make sure that we can get control. Because we cannot have the people who are supposed to be helping us hurting us too. We need to implement more body cameras and have active surveillance and use them in our active court cases as well, not dismiss them. And we need to understand that although we can't control racism, we can control how to stop unlawful killings and giving fair prosecution and trials. If these people are allegedly believed to have done something wrong, they should have a fair trial, but instead they're having a funeral. In conclusion, I have spoken with you today about what police brutality is, and I've given you examples and a brief solution as to how we can help mend these situations so that more lives do not get lost. I hope that this resonates with you today, and we can all stop this together. Thank you.